Welcome you back to the stage. Shh. We are once again on some time constraint because we're going to do another international handover. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the morning's discussion and I hope you enjoyed lunch. I thought it was a terrific morning, and I think you all lived up to the challenge that I set, which was really to take this conversation further, to become more granular, to become more concrete. We had, I thought, a terrific conversation about millennials and how millennials are demanding this conversation be changed. We had a panel about Brexit. I'm glad to say it was only one panel about Brexit, but it was a very interesting panel about Brexit. We had a conversation between several CEOs hearing concretely what you're doing, and then a very interesting conversation about the case studies of companies working in harsh environments. So I think altogether it was a terrific conversation. I learned very briefly, I think, 4 things. One is, from Javier Bettel onwards, the importance of leadership. And all of you who spoke up about that too, congratulations. It does seem incredibly important that the signal is there and the commitment is there from the top of the organization. And the commitment to do much more than just have a box ticking, yes, we're pursuing a diversity agenda, yes, we care about LGBT. It's much, much more about that. Secondly, authenticity. That really struck me. That's what millennials demand. And frankly, that's what we should demand, even those of us who are not millennial. I mean, it's no good just to tick boxes. We need a very real, authentic commitment. And I think it was really interesting that you came up with concrete ideas about how to do that. And whether it is the use of asking people their preferred gender pronoun in interviews, whether it is gender-neutral bathrooms, whether it is any number of other steps that can be taken, it is really important that this is an authentic commitment. And finally, I think it's the leadership step by step. Don't expect everything to happen immediately. We learned that. Now with that, I'm going to turn to Tom, who I hope is in New York. Hello, New York. Can you hear us?
We can. It seems to be working. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. I can hear you loud and clear. Tom Standage, deputy editor, my colleague. Tom, we've had a fantastic day so far. I will give you a very brief update. I've just summarized for the audience here what I thought we were up to. It's been an action-packed morning. We've had discussions about the importance of millennials in, not just for our businesses, but in driving the diversity agenda. We had a Brexit panel. We had a CEOs panel. And we had case studies of companies working in harsh environments. And I think, and I've just said this, but I will say it again because I do really believe it. One is that there were sort of 3 or perhaps even 4 things that came through. One, very clearly the importance of leadership. We learned, and we had, as you know, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Javier Bettel, but Thomas Bubel, the CEO of AXA, and many participants in the audience really making the point that leadership from the very top is central. And authenticity. Don't try and fake this. You have to be actually really seriously committed to the diversity agenda. It's not enough just to say, yes, yes, we really care about LGBT. You have to show and rightly be authentic in your commitment to it, and millennials will demand it. And millennials can actually really push this in companies very fast. And we learned from AXA, I think, how remarkably quickly a large and probably by reputation stodgy company has changed. And thirdly, it's a function of go step by step. Don't think you can do everything all at once. You can push change remarkably quickly, but go step by step. And the steps you take will depend a little bit on where you are and what kind of an environment you're in. So that's sort of a very snapshotty summary. We actually did a lot more than that. But I think we'd asked ourselves, and I know you, Tom, you and I have talked about this, that this year we had to push the agenda beyond recognizing the business case for LGBT inclusion, which is what we did last year, to really saying, how can we push this forward? How can we get commitments? How can we help have the conversation, the concrete conversation that helps us all implement things and make our environments much more diverse and inclusive? And I think we've taken some concrete steps towards that.
Cool. That seems to align very closely also with the summary that we've been sent from the first leg of this 3-part event from Hong Kong. Once again, the importance of the role that companies can play in setting the tone and changing culture, and in particular, taking best practices to conservative parts of the world. And I think that was a particularly strong theme in Asia. And we will be having a panel later today about exactly that, how companies should operate in different parts of the world and how they should operate as a multinational in environments that have very different rules and very different cultures. Another aspect of the discussion in Asia that seems to have come across was absolutely the role of of leadership, and in particular, I think in a hierarchical society, a seniority-based society, that's even more important. This is not going to happen from the bottom up. It's going to have to be a top-down approach, and it has to be genuine. It can't be a sort of bolt-on from the HR department of just sort of expecting the I can delegate this. No, it has to be genuinely led from the top by the CEO. The interesting thing that struck me, because I'm a massive technology nerd, about the Asian discussion, and I wonder whether this will come up today, is the question of the fact that this is a constantly evolving agenda, and one of the examples of this that I was particularly struck by is the idea of algorithmic discrimination. And I think this is something that has been discussed a fair amount. As we have machine learning systems making decisions about things, how can we be sure that they're not unwittingly being programmed to discriminate? And that's an example of the kind of new challenge that is constantly going to arise. So this is not something where you can sort of say, we've done this, we've set the right tone, we've set the right culture. Diversity and inclusion practices need to be constantly evolving. So I'm hoping that those themes that you've pointed out today that have run right the way through from Hong Kong to London will be continued today in our discussion here in New York.
Absolutely. We had some interesting comments and contributions about the use of technology too, particularly the way that you can use social media to essentially get your LGBT agenda and your drive started very quickly, and how that gives people, particularly the anonymity, if people can choose to respond anonymously, gives people more space in environments where this is, earlier on this process. So we're in there with that. The one thing that you guys, I think, need to focus on is what happens in the US under its new political leadership. But right now, we are, I hope, going to Santiago, where we have President Bachelet with us. Thank you so much for joining us. You are live being beamed to London and New York. We're delighted that you've been able to join us. And I'd like to start, I know you have very little time, perhaps you could say a bit about what you are now doing in Chile, because I understand that you have committed to submit to Congress a bill on marriage equality during the first half of 2017.
Thank you, Zanny. Very happy to be here with you. Yes, we have been working in our country in terms of trying to ensure that everyone, regardless of who they love or with which gender identity they identify, that can have the same rights, same opportunities, and they're not discriminated or subjects of hate. So, and this is something that is linked with what you were just discussing with Tom. It needed political leadership, but it also needed the LGBT community to be very strongly, I would say, defending their rights and their possibilities. So in 2012, we had two events. I mean, there was a law against discrimination by any kind of situation, gender, sexual orientation, religion, etc. But it didn't go very fast, the discussions in Congress. So we had two situations. The Inter-American Human Rights Court decided that the state had not protected a judge who, she was a lesbian, and they took the children, the judiciary system here, took the children, did not permit them to stay with the mother because she was a lesbian. And on the other hand, there was this young boy, Daniel Zamudio, that he was killed by a bunch of guys because he was gay. So that kind of situation horrified the society and the political groups, so they decided to approve this law against discrimination, But afterwards, we started discussing the issue of how can we couples live together and have the same rights of a marriage couple. So what we did in 2015, we enacted a law that created the civil union agreement, which can be celebrated equally by same-sex or different-sex couples. And the civil union grants the civil partners a marital status. They're a family, they have social security, and they have hereditary rights, among other benefits that are only in the former legislation reserved to married people. So far, those 10,702 couples have celebrated the agreement with 24% of same-sex couple. That was, in a country like Chile, that is a little bit conservative, you have to advance step by step. So that was the first milestone, but we are working towards seeking complete equality. And that's why we currently are undergoing a broad and participative citizen process towards the drafting of a bill that will introduce equal marriage in our country, and that we intend to send in the first semester of this year. We're also discussing a gender identity bill at Parliament that will allow transgender people to rectify their birth registration and identification documents according to their gender identity. I know that we're going probably slower than we would like to, but it is a process that it has changed dramatically. In my first term, I mean, you would not get the approval, the support that has today. Today, 62% of Chileans believe that same-sex couple also have the right to marry. So I think we have been advancing culturally, and there has been we have worked together with the LGBT community and the government and Congress to help going in the direction of a more fair country.
It's interesting. I mean, you say you have gone step by step and perhaps slower than some, but it is worth remembering how far you've come. I mean, Chile is, as you say, a conservative country. I think it was 2004, Chile was the last country in the Western Hemisphere to legalize divorce. That is only beyond just over a decade ago. So this is a very conservative country that is coming quite a long way. And do you expect your marriage equality bill to pass this year?
Well, we will send it to Congress this year, but probably will take time, because in 2014, I sent the bill to decriminalize abortion for 3 causes, and we're still in the discussion 2 years later. So this is a slow pace, but we're trying to move, to move towards the direction of equal rights for everyone.
And what tips can you give for how to advance an agenda? You were the founding director of UN Women. You have a history of championing gender equality. Did that experience equip you to help you think about how to advance the LGBT agenda? And what advice do you give? Because there are many business leaders here who are thinking about how to do this, particularly in countries which are more conservative.
Well, I think one of the more difficult things is the cultural change. And I can say it also because I just came from a meeting from a group of women corporate directors. And in our country, we're also trying to include more women in directors and boards of companies, and it's not easy. We have given the example, and I think one thing is important, you mentioned with Tom, leadership, and you have to give the example in government, so you can introduce policies, and we are working on terms of changing our programs and policies that did not consider the LGBT experience and their particularities to include and to make them more accessible and more adequate to their necessities and their realities. So one thing is what you can do inside government, including this perspective. As I've worked for many years to include the gender perspective in all the policies and programs, and also the particular I would say, views and needs of the LGBT community. On the other hand, you have to give the example also, not only through policies, but also to include people at high-level positions that are people coming from the LGBT community. Because I've seen also when I work at the National Commission of HIV and AIDS, that culture is very difficult to change. But when you can show, and the same happened with women, that has to be always saying that they're capable and showing they're capable. When people get used to the idea to work together with others, it's not easy sometimes for workers, for businesses, to include some worker who is a trans, or I can imagine for a baker to make a wedding cake with 2 grooms or 2 brides. But I think it's a process. And I think, first of all, you need to have the courage to go forward this agenda. Second, you need to give example. And you need to create the institutional basis and also the legal basis to fight against discrimination and to incentivize the possibility of equality. On the other hand, when the crisis was there, and I went to Davos, everybody was saying that diversity for the future of the economy and the future of the challenges that the society and the world is going to confront, diversity is one of the essential issues. And diversity is many different things. It means men, women, people from different regions working in a company, but also it means including the sexual diversity. Because, of course, you can have better products, you can have another perspective, another experience. But also, you know, I have here some numbers according to the Chilean LGBT Chamber of Commerce and Tourism. The LGBT population of our country moves around 2,700 million per year and concentrates their spending in tourism, leisure, technology, and personal consumption goods. And it's also estimated that the LGBT tourist spends 8 to 10 times more than the average tourist. So there's a lot of successes and opportunities for business to understand that this is a great opportunity.
Thank you. I think my colleague Tom has a question for you from New York.
Okay.
Is this mic up? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
In Chile. Brilliant, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to ask you, one of the big themes here in New York today is definitely going to be how the election of Donald Trump and the rise of the more populist strand of politics more broadly is going to affect the way that this the diversity agenda is promoted. How do you see Chile's role, both within the Americas and in the world more broadly, as this sort of politics spreads?
Well, you know, Chile is a country that has been successful thanks to a huge amount of free trade agreements everywhere. I think Chile is the country that has more free trade agreements in the world. And we have been able to, I would say, improve our economy, our GDP, etc. So everywhere I will go, and with the other members of the Pacific Alliance, we will be telling what we think about these issues. I would say advocating for these issues, as well as the whole human rights agenda, including LGBT community. So as presidents, I mean, we respect what happens in every country, but we are very respectfully, we will be making our voices be heard.
Excellent. That seems to me to be a wonderful note to leave, making our voices be heard. You as president, all of us here in all of our roles in this pursuit of the diversity agenda. Michelle Bachelet, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Tom. I wish you a very successful day in New York. You are just starting. We are getting to the second half of our event. You've got a lot of things you've got to cover, and we want to know what the view of New York is in the world of Trump and how that affects this very important agenda. Tom, over to you. And we will now, I think you get to the end of that, and we move to our next panel here. Good luck in your conversations, and can I ask Helen to come back to the stage to moderate our next panel here in London? Helen Joyce.